Hi, I'm Julia, and welcome back to NB Library. If you can hear a sort of construction blowing noise constantly in the background, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I need to film right now, and that noise could be going all day. Hopefully the mic won't pick up on it, and you won't even know what I'm talking about. I read 22 books in June. Not as many as I was hoping, but I was sick in there, and so I reread parts of a book, and I started a book that I didn't finish. I think there might have been a few of those. And summer plans are starting to ramp up, so I've been a little bit busier. But I did read some that I was really excited about, and there'll be some books that I won't mention because they're in future videos, or videos that have already come out, actually, in the case of some of my favorite tropes books. Of those 22 books, 31.82% were purchased, a little bit lower than what I'd like it to be. My goal is 33% each month, but that's pretty close. 27.7% were on audio, which is really low for me. 27.27% were by white authors, 36.36% were by Black authors, and 36.36% were by Indigenous and other POC authors. And my average rating was a respectable 3.81 stars. And I'm really excited to talk to you about the first book that I read. This was Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah. I'm very lucky that this was, I think, published in the US, or maybe my library just had a copy of a British book. Mensah has another book out that just came out, I think, a few weeks ago that was only released in the UK, so I might have it shipped over from Blackwell's because I love this book so much. This book is about Harley, who is a Black man living in England. His father is from maybe Zimbabwe, I can't remember, but his father is an African immigrant, and Harley is gay. He is about 21 and recently left university out of his music journalism program because he was having mental health issues, and now is just kind of drifting through life a little bit, and he returns to this friend group and this one particular friend, Chelsea, who he ends up living with and renting a room from. And Chelsea has another housemate named Muddy, who is white, seems to be straight, and is just a huge big hug of a man, and I loved him so much. He's like one of my favorite characters of the year. I loved Muddy. So this book starts with and does contain depictions of a suicide attempt and suicidal ideation. I think it was handled really beautifully. It's sometimes hard for me to read that and read depictions of self-harm. So please take care of yourself going into this, but I think it was handled so respectfully and beautifully. Muddy notices that Harley is struggling and starts to include him in his kind of favorite things. Muddy loves bird watching, and Harley is really going through it, but he is also like funny and kind and trying to be like a good friend and participating in Chelsea's friend group. And there were some just really fun, complicated dynamics in this friend group. They've all like dated each other at one point. So there's Chelsea, Muddy, Chelsea's current boyfriend, and Muddy's friend Finley, and then Muddy's ex-girlfriend and Finley's current girlfriend, Noria, who's also Black and is kind of the only Black friend that Harley has, and so he really enjoys their connection and is jealous of her relationship with her dad because his relationship with his dad is really bad, and she does his hair for him, and so he finds like a lot of joy in their friendship. And just a lot of joy in his friendship with Muddy. He has a huge crush on Muddy, but is also falling back into this relationship with an older white man who fetishizes him, whom he like only has a sexual relationship with. And I love that the book is called Small Joys because it could have been like really sad, but Muddy was such a wonderful, uplifting character, and Harley goes through like such beautiful character development where he gets a therapist and he like lets people in and starts talking to people, And it's just made up of all of these small joys alongside all of the tough things that Harley is going through. I rated it 4.5 stars, and it is one of my favorite books of the year so far. I then read The Burning Stone by Kate Elliott, the third book in the Crown of Stars series. This is where the word count really starts to ratchet up in this series, so this book is 801 pages, probably also contributed to why I didn't read as many books this month. I rated this one 3.75 stars, which is a big step down from rating the previous book in the series, Prince of Dogs, 4.5 stars, another one of my favorite books of the year. This one felt like a lot of setup, despite the fact that it's 800 pages long. Like, you know, it's practically a book trilogy in and of itself, but it felt like, oh, the noise stopped. Oh, God, that is so relieving. Anyway, it felt like this book was a lot of setup to later books in the series, but there were none of the, like, exciting, like, battles or moments of King's Dragon and Prince of Dogs. And there were, I think, 5 weddings in this book as well. Like, this was the wedding book. And it's not that things didn't move forward. Like, everyone's storylines move forward in a big way, and things happen, people learn things about themselves, characters died. There was a big revelation that I didn't predict, but I realized it slightly before Sister Rosvita, my bae, did. I think that I figured out something that the characters haven't figured out yet, because they don't have all the information that the reader does about who Liath's mom is. I remember after I finished this book, we had some friends over and I was telling them what I'd been reading, and I was like, so then Sister Rosvita talks to Mother Obligata, and Mother Obligata says that she had a kid with this person, and then the kid's name was this, which means that that person is descended from this person, which means that this person is not telling the truth about something, and I'm, like, avoiding spoilers here. But again, I want to, like, do a point to the character images on the wall recap, and then every time I'd point to Sister Rosvita, I would add, like, heart and sparkle effects, because I love her so much. Also, Hannah and Hathaway, love those two gals, especially Hathaway. Oh my god, like, butch of my dreams. I already have the next book in the series, Child of Flame, so I'm eager to get to that one. I'm gonna read it in July. And maybe all of the payoff, the setup in The Burning Stone will pay off in Child of Flame, and I'll go, wow, all of that setup was so necessary. It's not that it's not necessary, like, this was a book that told a story, but it did feel like kind of a big breath before letting a bunch of stuff out, and the breath was not, like, released yet in this book. I then read But Not Too Bold by Hache Pueyo. This was for the In Translation Square on the r/fantasy book bingo, and I'm really glad that I read it. It's a short novella, it's 112 pages, and it is a sapphic, like, Bluebeard retelling, but the Bluebeard is a giant female spider, and the main character is, like, into her, but also the spider eats people, and so I was like, get it, girl, monster fucking, but also like, girl, she's gonna eat you, and not in a fun way. But I liked the writing. For some reason that I can't name, Bluebeard is one of my favorite fairy tales. Very gruesome, I know. So I liked the use of that fairy tale here, and I'm gonna check out Hache Pueyo's first full-length novel, which is getting released, I think, next year, called Tyrant in the Cracks, I want to say. Tor just announced it, but I'm excited to check out more by this author. And I rated that one 3.75 stars. Next, I read the essay collection This Is Major by Shayla Lawson. Lawson is a Black non-binary author, and I love essay collections. I end up reading a lot of essay collections by Black authors. This one was pretty, like, meaty. I went into it thinking it was going to be more humor, but it was, like, pretty dark in some places and talking a lot about being Black in America. So there weren't a lot of points where I was like, wow, this is so entertaining, but it was just like, this is giving me a lot to think about. So I ended up not rating it because it feels like memoir adjacent, and I don't really rate memoirs. I then read After Hours at Dooryard Books, got a longer review of that in my favorite tropes video, but I rated it 4.25 stars and I really liked it. Next was an arc. This was Misery's Wife by Joan Tierny. The arc was provided to me by Flatiron Books, so thank you, and the book is out in July 14th, so you'll be able to get it shortly after this video comes out. This is the retelling of a Portuguese fairy tale, and it is a, like, cli-fi fantasy book. The main character is a trans woman who is the youngest girl in a family of 4 sisters, and her older sisters are all a lot older than her, so she was very young when they became adults, but all 3 of them were whisked away by a magical, like, king of a certain, like, the air or the sea or, like, king of sadness, because all of them wished for this man, and he was like, here I am, I've come to take you to your palace, you're my wife now. The youngest, I guess, youngest except for the main character, Elixane, is married to the King of Sadness, and after a few years of being married to him, and after Elixane herself has come of age, she's I think about 19, she sends a message asking for Elixane's help. I really admire this author for committing to using the fairy tale language. Like, this is not just a fairy tale retelling, it is a book-length fairy tale. We've got lots of things repeated in threes, lots of things just repeated, period. And while the language is gorgeous, like, repeating the same passages over and over again got pretty grating after a while. Like, it reminded me of when I was a kid in elementary school and the librarian would read us a book, and by, like, the middle to end of the book, you're able to kind of, like, chant the repetitive parts along with them, and it felt a little bit like that, and that's not really what I'm looking for in a full-length novel. Like, if this was a novella, I think it would have been perfect, but I think that the, like, I hesitate to say gimmick, but the format was stretched out a little too much. I think also with a book-length fairy tale, rather than it being just a fairy tale retelling, I wanted more depth from the characters. Like, it's not like they were one-dimensional. There were some, like, complicated dynamics with especially abusive relationships going on, but I just wanted, like, more depth from Elixane. I mean, she's a very strong character and she drives a lot of the plot forward, but at the same time, I feel like I didn't know a lot about her interiority. She was just, like, kind of boring, and she has a romance with a female character that is, like, the goddess of bad luck, essentially, but it wasn't super present. So if you're, like, you like books with minimal romance, you may like this, but also, like, towards the end, every character, they had this conversation like 5 times where they were like, you know, Elixane, a fairy tale always ends with a marriage. Are you gonna get married? And she's like, I've kissed this woman like twice. We're not even dating yet. Calm down. So that felt very like Amada normative, and it had not spent enough time on their relationship for me to be like, yay, I want them to get married. I'm like, we'll see where this goes. So because of all of that, I rated it 3.5 stars. I then listened to Once There Was by Kiyash Monsef on audio, and this one is, like, really hard to not describe but define. Like, it kind of defies genre convention. It's a middle grade to, like, young adult book. I think the main character is 15. This is really, like, an atypical YA story. Basically, it's set in the modern day. The main character is half Persian and was living with her dad after her mom passed away, and then her dad is murdered under mysterious circumstances. So Marjan inherits his veterinary practice and is, like, expected to run it, and meets with her accountant and, like, goes to the vet clinic every day after school, and no one is like, hey, you don't have to do this. Like, let's set up a guardianship or something for you here. And, like, she is in the custody of her neighbor who lives next door and doesn't come live with her and just, like, drops off food and makes sure that she's alive. And I'm not saying that this can't happen in real life, but I'm just like, geez Louise, can she please have like a good adult figure in her life? Early on, after her dad passes away, a mysterious woman comes to the clinic and asks Marjan to help her with something and gives her a first-class ticket to England and basically says, like, I'll explain later, I need you to do something, get on this plane. And she's intrigued and has, you know, the decision-making power of a 15-year-old, and so she does, and she finds out that both her and her dad have the ability to not heal, but diagnose magical creatures, and magical creatures are real in this world. So she goes to this estate in England where a griffin lives, and he's so old that he has been taken care of by generations of this family, and she makes friends with the son of the current guy. And eventually returns back home, but then she is called upon to diagnose other magical beings, and then there is a sort of like secret society that gets involved, and also this tech billionaire who wants to collect all of the magical creatures for himself. There's also a teenage witch that comes to live with her, and that was the part that felt the most like, what are we doing here? It's like, it wasn't bad and I liked their relationship, but it was also like, okay, magical creatures and she's the vet, sure, but like, are witches real? And the book never even like answers that question. It's just that the witch thinks she's a witch. But it was kind of like melancholy, and I understand that like there are books where teenagers and kids get failed by adults, but I just find those books like pretty depressing, and it makes me rate them lower just because it's like not to my personal taste. Like, I want someone to come help them. So I rated this 3.5 stars. I then read To the Moon and Back by Eliana Ramage, which I rated 4 stars, and you'll see that in an upcoming video. Next, I read one of the oldest books on my TBR, Tilly and the Bookwanderers by Anna James. I've had this on my shelf for over 6 years. Yeah, I think 6 years. This is the first book in a middle grade fantasy series, and it's basically the main character finds out that she and her whole family can bring book characters into the real world to talk to them and also go into books. So it's like middle grade Thursday Next. I've got like book 3 right here. Oh, it's covered in dust. And kind of typically in a book like this, the main characters all love classics because the author can't, like, maybe isn't able to, with copyright laws, talk about any books newer than that. But I'm just like, can't we have a book where the kid's like, I want to bring one of the dragons from Wings of Fire. And then the grandpa, because she's raised by her grandparents, like, his special close literary friend is Sherlock Holmes, and is like, Tilly comes across him talking to Sherlock Holmes in the bookstore that they live in, and for the first half of this book I was just kind of lost in fantasizing about having this power and how cool it would be, and how I would just go hang out with Sam Vimes if he'd have me, just follow him around like he's my dad. But I think that it gets into its own premise and is not just coasting on the like, don't you just love books thing, where there is this plot that really gets going and you find out more about this society of people that can do this, that have this power, and more about her mom who went missing around the time she was born. And although I won't be continuing the series, I think that the way it ends is really cool and satisfying. So I rated this 3.75 stars. I then finished on my lunch break, because it was so short, Ivelez Explains It All by Andrea Beatriz Arango. Like Arango's other work that I've read, It's All or Nothing Ballet, this was a book in verse. It's middle grade, and the main character is really struggling with grief and mental health after her father passed away in a car accident and she was also in the car. This also happens in It's All or Nothing Valley, where the main character was injured in a car accident. So that's an interesting through line in Arango's work, I guess. Basically, Ivelez is trying to, like, explain how she's feeling to people, and she feels like she's not being listened to. Her grandma has come to live with them from Puerto Rico and is, like, really loves her, but is unsupportive of her, like, going to therapy or taking any medication because, like, her generation just doesn't, like, talk about that. But she's also suffering from early dementia. Because it's a book in verse, there really wasn't, like, much more than that, but I liked how it was done, and I rated it 4 stars. I then read There's Only One Sin in Hollywood by Rashid Newson, which you can see the longer review for in my favorite tropes video, but I rated it 3 stars. Then was The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. Nope, just an email. So, real quick, I'm waiting for 2 different emails to come in. One is a sketch from my tattoo artist of a new tattoo that I'm gonna get, and the other is an email from NetGalley saying that my arc for the Flower Court by Kate Elliott has been approved, because Tor has approved all of my requests so far, and I don't know why they're waiting so long. It's only been like 3 days. But I think that they should give me the arc. So Tor Publishing, if you're watching this, please approve my arc request. Anyway, The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. June is Indigenous Canadian Heritage Month, so I read this and then another book that you'll see for that. I was a little bit disappointed by this book. It's literary fiction. It's like historical fiction where there is a Native Canadian family who comes down to Maine every year to work as farm laborers and pick blueberries, and the 2 youngest children in the family were off on their own, like eating lunch, and Joe, the older brother, was supposed to be watching her, but he basically looks away for a few minutes and then his 4-year-old sister Ruthie is gone. So we then follow Joe throughout the next few decades of his life and this young woman named Norma, who is raised by 2 wealthy white WASP parents in Maine, but there's a lot of mystery about her childhood, and of course, like, you know that Norma and Ruthie are the same person. The first reason that this book was not as good as it could have been is in the prologues. This is not a spoiler, it's like the first page. Joe is dying of cancer, and Ruthie has found them and, like, comes to visit him and the family. I think this was the worst possible choice they could have made. That should have been kept until it actually happened in the book. And then there should have been this, like, constant tension and dramatic irony of you going like, oh my god, are they gonna see each other before Joe dies? I want them to see each other again so badly, but I don't know. But you know from page 1 that they're gonna get back together, and I just think that was a really bad choice. And then second, it just feels like a sequence of events of someone's life in just a really boring way. Like, Norma/Ruthie's childhood is really boring and stifling. Her parents don't let her leave the house, basically. She never makes any friends. She has, like, 1 relationship. The like most interesting dynamic is her relationship with her aunt, who's a lesbian, and her aunt's partner is a therapist. And, like, you know basically that her aunt is complicit in her having been kidnapped, even if she, like, didn't help. She knows that her sister-in-law didn't give birth to this baby and is supporting Norma, but, like, maintaining this lie for most of her adult life. And then Joe becomes basically a itinerant laborer. He goes all over Canada and the US, working in various, like, logging camps or farming camps over the seasons. And none of it felt like, aside from obviously the fact that these characters have been traumatized by this event in their childhood, it doesn't feel like a series of And then this thing happened because of this, or like, and then that sent this off on, you know, this plot line because of this choice that this person made. It just felt like a series of and then, and then, and then, and then. And so it was just like boring. And I had been recommended this as like a book that was really emotionally devastating, and it's sad, but it's still boring, and all of the tension has been brought out of it like a leaky balloon because of the prologue. I then read Just Ask Elsie by my friend Ari Koontz. Ari is my good friend from college and writing buddy, so know that going into this review. This is a queer middle grade book that is basically a middle grade version of the Netflix show Sex Education. Elsie is part of Unitarian Universalist Church and is having a like Sunday school class that is teaching her all about puberty and sex and gender. And she realizes that not everyone in her school is getting the same level of education, and people have questions, and their sex education consists of like one video at the end of the year, which, same, relatable. So she decides to like become a peer educator and answer her friends and peers' question and even create a zine. Meanwhile, she is kind of having a fight with her best friend and also crushing on this girl. And I loved how much agency Elsie had, and it made me realize that characters in middle grade have a lot of the time so much more agency than like in middle grade or even adult books, where like sometimes in romantasy, I haven't read very many of them, but like I watch reviews and stuff, and it feels like the main female character is just being yanked around by the plot and like never makes a decision. But in middle grade, like one of the points of middle grade books is to like teach kids, and not only to entertain kids, but like have something that they can learn from about, you know, how to be and how to handle things. And so the main characters kind of like have to have agency in a good middle grade book. And I just loved how Elsie is trying all of these things and like messing up, but apologizing, and how determined she is to like bring sex education to her school, even when she gets pushback from the administration, especially when she starts educating about LGBT issues. There's a point where she and her friends have this plan and they could get in big trouble, and like leading up to it, it's so tense, and Elsie's like, I feel like I'm gonna go throw up, and I'm like, girl, same. So I rated that 4 stars, and I really recommend that you check it out or get it for a kid in your life. I then read Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I rated 4.5 stars, but you don't want to hear about it here. You'll see that in a future vlog. I then finished The Scarlet Ball by Nghi. In my Portland vlog, you may have seen me reading this, but I didn't like finish it in that video, so I didn't talk about it. This was an arc from Tor Publishing. It comes out in the fall. Nghi is one of my favorite authors, and she just doesn't miss. This had all the like, not whimsical, but like it has all of these great world building details that I love about her work. And she does it so effortlessly, where like the prose doesn't feel bogged down by descriptions. This is set in the same world as The Chosen and the Beautiful and its sequel, Don't Sleep with the Dead. And it's still in New York, but aside from kind of the general like fantastical elements, there's one reference to demoniac, which they also drink in The Chosen and the Beautiful. They maybe go, oh, okay, this is set in the same world, but it's kind of following like 2 different magic systems in a way. So main character Judith is French and Vietnamese. She's come to America recently in the last few years and works at a hat shop, and she gets swept up in this kind of magical season in New York, in this high society where essentially the women marry demons. And they're not exactly demons, they're like natural disasters in human form. And so there's this woman whose granddaughter went missing. She is married to a wildfire, and she wants Judith to stand in for her granddaughter and, like, go through this season, go to the events, and attract a husband. Now, the woman and her granddaughter are not Vietnamese or Asian, and so she has to literally stitch a white face onto Judith. So there are some, like, definitely, like, body horror moments in this book. Judith is a great character. She's so strong and smart and confident. She's not, like, a good person, but she is sympathetic, even though I am disappointed by the choice that she made at the end. I still think that the plot had all of the satisfaction and, like, inevitability of a fairy tale. And I rated it 4 stars. I then read a lot of middle grade this month. The Forgotten Summer of Seneca by Camryn Garrett, which is a middle grade book. I thought that this was gonna be time travel because it's about main character who goes to stay with her aunt for the summer in New York, and in Central Park she finds a portal to essentially a, like, magical version of Seneca Village, which was on the spot that Central Park now is, where a lot of Black folks lived, and when the city wanted to create Central Park, they forced everyone out and razed it to the ground. So I thought that she was going to be going back in time to Seneca Village, but actually she's going to a sort of pocket dimension where the descendants of the Seneca villagers who have magic, like, escaped to. This book was just fine. It was, like, the most fine it could have been. It was inoffensive, but not really doing enough, so I rated it 3 stars. I then read the wonderful Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo. I didn't even know this book existed until I read about it on the blog LGBTQ Reads, which I highly recommend. It was published in 2013, which is probably why I haven't heard of it, but this is my 3rd book by Evaristo, and this tells the story of a Caribbean immigrant to the UK who is gay but has been in a lavender marriage for 50 years, alongside dating his boyfriend of 50 years, who is also from Antigua. They're all in their 70s now, and Barry, the main character, like, wants to divorce his wife so he can be with his boyfriend, but he's also really scared of his life changing. He has 2 daughters that he really loves and is worried about how they're going to react. And so it's literary fiction. It's just this story of this deeply flawed but, like, really funny and sympathetic man. And there are also a few chapters that are told in 2nd person but are from his wife's point of view, and you see what was going on in kind of the last 5 decades for her. And, like, all the characters in this book are complicated. You feel really bad for her, but at the same time she's very religious and homophobic. All of these characters are just very complicated and realistic. But it was so enjoyable, so satisfying, had some great, like, character development, and I really recommend it. I gave it 4.25 stars. Then, also for Canadian Indigenous Heritage Month, I read Medicine Walk by Richard Wagamese. This is the story of 16-year-old Frank, whose father, who was never there for him, kind of summons him to his deathbed and tells him that he wants his son to take him out into the wilderness and bury him out there. Frank has been raised by this guy just called the Old Man, and a lot of the times characters are referred to by their names in this book. It's just like his father and the kid, but they are named. You know, the main character's name is Frank and his father is Eldon, and you do get the old man's name eventually. So they're going on this journey. Eldon is dying of liver failure. He was an alcoholic, and he is telling kind of his life story to Frank, and Frank gets to decide whether all of that justifies the neglect and disappointment that his father put him through over 16 years. The writing was beautiful. Frank is a great character, like, he's super competent, but I think he was a little unrealistic as a 16-year-old. Like, it says that he got talked to and treated like a man growing up, so he acts like a man, but I think that it's a little unrealistic that a 16-year-old would be this, like, emotionally mature and good at things. And I would have liked to see him have a few more flaws. But, like, this had the, like, devastation that I wanted the berry pickers to have. I think these two, like, make a really good conversation with each other. It was very, like, quietly beautiful, and I gave it 4 stars. I then read A Black Queer History of the United States by Darius, Bost, and C. Riley Snorton, which you will see in an upcoming video. And I gave it 3.5 stars. Almost done here. I listened to Salt Crop by Yumi Kitase on audio. This is a kind of near future cli-fi story. It's probably set about like 50 to 100 years in the future. This is a world that kind of underwent climate change and agricultural collapse, and now a lot of the world is dependent on this one corporation called Renewal and the seeds that they put out, and also chemical protection against this thing called the blight that affects crops. We're following 3 sisters in one family. I read this for the Sisters Square on the r/female gaze SFF Spring and Summer Reading Challenge. Such a mouthful. So the kind of like first 40% to half of the book is narrated by the youngest sister, Skipper, and the plot kicks off when Skipper and Carmen, the 2 youngest sisters, get a message from their oldest sister, Nora, who works for Renewal as a scientist, and she basically says, like, I'm in danger, please come help me. So they get on Skipper's little boat, travel around. It's vague about what country they're in. I think that they live in maybe like the Seattle area or like just south of Seattle, and then they end up sailing to British Columbia, although they have to be on the East Coast actually because they do sail across the Atlantic at some point. So they're somewhere in like rural New England, travel up to Canada at some point, and then across to like Nordic countries. So the first like half or so is this sea journey of them finding all these breadcrumbs that Nora left about where she is, and then when we get to this place where Nora is being held, it switches over to Carmen's point of view, and then finally you get the last like 20% from Nora's point of view. And it's really interesting seeing every character through each other's eyes, but then also seeing things from their point of view, because every time it switched over to a character's point of view, I was like, yeah, they are right. And then it would switch over to another sister, and I'd be like, come on, Carmen, give Nora a break. And we do see a lot of like events through all of their eyes where one character is like, and this thing was really formative to me, and this is why I have problems with XYZ. And then the older sister comes in and goes, that's not what happened. You're remembering that wrong. It happened because of this. You didn't have the full picture, or you misinterpreted something. I have a sister. Our relationship is super important to me, and so I love seeing sisters represented in fiction. This was kind of hard to listen to because every time you think that it couldn't get worse, it gets worse. And it's like so bleak and just so depressing, and you can see like, yeah, this feels like a realistic thing that would happen in 50 years. And kind of like the divide between rural areas that are really struggling and then high-tech cities where people are so much more privileged. But worry not. If you want to read this book, it does turn out all right in the end. And I'm not going to say how, but I thought that it was satisfying and cathartic, and after all of these trials and tribulations, that it was a satisfying ending. And such a relief. Second to last book of the month was Summer Official by Rebecca Weatherspoon. I've read Rafe and Zini by Weatherspoon, and I didn't realize that she'd made the jump to traditionally publishing, so good for her. I found this in a bookstore and wouldn't have known about it otherwise. This is a young adult sapphic romance. It is a summer romance, as you can probably tell from the title, and it was so cute. So cute. The two main characters are Heaven and Sailor. Sailor's mom is an influencer, and they're both Black and biracial. Sailor is half Black, half white, and Heaven is half Black and half Korean. And her mom's name is Maureen Gu. When I noticed that, I was like, hang on a second. Maureen Gu, one of my favorite YA authors. Anyway, I know it was on purpose. Sailor is trying to avoid her mom over the summer while her mom is like a mommy vlogger, basically. Sailor does not want to be in her videos. And then Heaven's dad always creates a summer bingo for her to complete. And so the two of them start to do that together. But Sailor says, hey, if you like help me get out of the house, I will help you like become more confident and ready to talk to people, because Heaven wants to be a tattoo artist and needs to beef up her Instagram page and like get good at talking to people and marketing herself. And so Sailor's like, I grew up with an influencer as a mom, I can totally help you with that. They have such good chemistry. The relationship is so adorable. The only problem that I have is, and I noticed this with Weatherspoon's other books, and I think that this just might be her style, but there's not a third act breakup, and there is like a sort of external conflict, external to the relationship, that happens that gets resolved pretty easily. And like kind of the whole book is building up to, like, you want Sailor to be able to talk to her mom about not wanting to be in her videos anymore. This also happens in Spells to Forget Us by Ashlyn Brophy, another sapphic YA book by a Black author. I think that although I didn't like that book as much as Summer Official, it does handle the parent influencer storyline better. And I think that it's just like anticlimactic here, and when I got to the last page I was like, wait, that's the last page? There's another book kind of in this series with the relationship of two other characters in this friend group that I will be reading because I really like this author. Anticlimaxes notwithstanding. And the last book that I read for the middle grade square of my r/fantasy book bingo was The Insiders by Mark Oshiro. This is my third or fourth book by Mark. I used to follow him and his Mark Does Stuff blog since high school, dating myself. In this book, main character Hector has recently moved from San Francisco to a little town called Orangevale. He's openly gay and is a theater kid, but in Orangevale he gets pretty horrifically bullied and tries to tell an adult at his school, and she doesn't believe him, and he doesn't want to tell his parents because he doesn't want to like be a burden while they have other stuff going on. And so it's just kind of like suffering in silence until he finds a magical door in his school that is always there when he needs it. I know that Mark was a Harry Potter fan, and it's essentially the Room of Requirement from Harry Potter. Of course, it never gets like called that, and Harry Potter is not alluded to in this book, which I am grateful for. But he finds that two other kids from schools across the country can also access this room, and so they become friends. I rated this 3.5 stars. I think that this book could have been better if the pacing was tightened up. It felt like there were things that happened later than I expected to, and it just moved kind of slowly. It's almost 400 pages, and it did not need to be. The bullying, while probably realistic, was really hard to read, especially as someone who was bullied. There are a lot of on-page depictions of like racist, homophobic bullying. And while the ending resolved nicely, I felt like it almost like wasn't enough for how just brutal the book kind of is. There's a minor bully character in Just Ask Elsie, and I was talking to Ari about bully characters, and I was kind of reflecting like, Not that this excuses bullying at all, but it feels a lot of the time like bullying on page, it like kind of only shows the bully bullying. But in my experience, like the kids who bullied me, I was not the only person in their life, you know, like, and we saw each other like all day, every day. And so I saw them like going through their own struggles, and sometimes they were nice to me, or sometimes we had to work on a group project. There was a girl, I don't want to say her full name, but we always said her full name because she had the same first name as a lot of other kids at school, and so she'd always get the full name treatment. I'll call her TA. So TA was friends with someone else who bullied me. We lived in the same neighborhood, and I went to a home daycare that was located next door to her house, and I was the oldest kid at the daycare. I was like, I think 12 or 13, and so we would hang out and play video games. Like, I played Rock Band for the first and only time at TA's house, and like, you know, she was kind of like quiet around me. I think that this other girl that she bullied me with was kind of like egged her on a little bit more. But yeah, we'd hang out, we'd play Guitar Hero, and I always forget the name of it, but the video game with the raccoon who's a burglar, I can't remember it now. And then during the school year, like on the school bus, she and this other kid would bully me. So if I were to write like a contemporary middle grade, I would maybe want to explore that dynamic, because it's so devastating to get bullied by someone that you know is like not bullying you all the time. And it's like, why can't you be cool all the time? But why do you have to only bully me sometimes? It's almost worse, you know? The bully in this book, like, it's not necessarily that we needed to see another side of him, like he's a racist, homophobic jerk, but at the same time it was like, I don't know, I just wanted to see like a little bit more nuance in that betrayal, and have all the characters just be a little bit more nuanced. But again, it's middle grade, so maybe it's okay. I just finished that yesterday. I'm filming this on July 1st. So that was the last book that I read in June. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back next week with I think I'm doing the mid-year freakout tag next week. I gotta film that at some point. So please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.